Today's topic is a circle of Willis. What is circle of Willis? The circle of Willis is also called circle of arteriosus. The circle of Willis is an anastomotic ring of arteries and that are located at the base of brains, which means the arteries are fused together and look like as a ring. Okay, then why it is called as a circle of Willis means these group of blood vessels in the brain that connect with each other and forming a continuous structure, and these continuous structure resembles as a circle. That's why we call it as a circle of Willis. These arterial anastomotic circle connects the two major arterial system, and that is internal carotid artery and vestibulo-basilar artery, means vertebral and the basilar artery. The vertebral arteries are once enter into the base of the brain and then it is formed as basilar artery. And now the blood supplying arteries to the brain that are arising from the aorta. Okay, now let's see and where it is from the heart. From this picture, let's know about the arteries of the brain. The first one is the ascending aorta, descending aorta, then arch of aorta. From the arch of aorta, there are the three main branches are arising. The first one is the right subclavian artery, then left subclavian artery. The central part is the left common carotid arteries. From these left subclavian artery, the left vertebral arteries are turning. From the right subclavian artery, the right vertebral artery and the right common carotid arteries are turning. From the common carotid arteries, then it's divided into the external and internal carotid arteries. Then let's see about from these aorta how the arteries are entering into the brain. And this is a right and left vertebral arteries. This is right common carotid artery and left common carotid artery, and these common carotid arteries are divided into the two. One is the internal and external carotid arteries, then that are enter into the brain and fused together and form as a circle, that and this circle of Willis supplying the blood to the brain. The next one is the systems. There are the two systems are involved in the blood supply of the brain. One is the carotid system, the another one is the vertebral system. The anterior system is a carotid system and the posterior system is also called as the vertebral system. The carotid system are again divided into the external and internal carotid. As before I said, the internal carotid system is one of the major sources of blood supplying to the central nervous system. The vertebral artery is the secondary sources of blood supply to the brain, and the vertebral arteries are entered through the foramen magnum to the cranial cavity. And now let's see what are all the arteries that involving the circle of Willis. These arteries are important to remember, which form the circulation. The first one is the anterior circulation, which means the carotid artery circulations. The arteries are internal carotid artery, anterior cerebral artery, middle cerebral artery, anterior communicating artery, posterior communicating artery, then ophthalmic artery, anterior choroidal artery. The next one is the posterior circulations. These posterior circulation, for easy remembering, will go for bottom to the top. First one is the vertebral artery, posterior inferior cerebellar artery, then anterior inferior cerebellar artery, then basilar artery, pontine branches, superior cerebellar artery. The last one is the posterior cerebral artery. These arteries are important to remember, then only we should be able to make a circle of Willis. The next picture shows how the arteries are connect to the brain and how it is make a circle. Okay, let's see. First we'll go with the vertebral artery, which means the posterior system, and we'll see what are all the arteries are connected with the vertebral artery and how they are supplying to the posterior part of the brain. The first one is the right and left vertebral artery, and these two arteries are arising from the right and left subclavian artery, and these two arteries are connecting together and form a basilar artery. The basilar artery are move upwards. The two vertebral arteries are again making some branches that move downward, that is called anterior spinal artery, and these anterior spinal artery are supplying blood to anterior part of the spine. The next one is the posterior inferior cerebellar artery, and these two arteries are directly arising from the vertebral artery, and the right and left posterior inferior cerebellar artery is also called pica. The next one is the anterior inferior cerebellar artery, and these arteries are first branch of the basilar artery. These right and left anterior inferior cerebellar artery is also called ica. The ica and pica is, the word is easy to remember for that posterior inferior cerebellar artery and the anterior inferior cerebellar arteries. And next, from the basilar artery there are the 5 small branches are arising, that is called pontine branches, and these branches are supplying blood to the pons. The next one is the white color indicate superior cerebellar artery, and the yellow indicate posterior cerebral artery. From the basilar artery, the last one is the posterior cerebral artery. From the basilar artery, the only one, these arteries are supplying blood to the cerebrum. Remaining all are, which means the posterior cerebellar artery, anterior inferior cerebellar artery, and posterior inferior cerebellar artery. These arteries are supplying blood to the cerebellum, that means the posterior part of the brain. That's all about the vertebral artery system or a posterior system. The next one is the internal carotid artery, which means the anterior system. The two white color dot indicate the internal carotid artery, the right and left internal carotid artery, and these arteries are supplying blood to anterior part of the brain. Then let's see what are all the arteries are arising from the internal carotid artery, and some arteries are connected together, that is called communicating artery, and see one by one. From these internal carotid artery, the anterior cerebral artery and the middle cerebral arteries are arising. The anterior cerebral arteries are move upwards. The middle cerebral arteries are midline from the internal carotid artery. The next one is the right and left anterior cerebral arteries are connected with anterior communicating artery. The next one is the posterior communicating artery, and these arteries are connecting the middle and posterior cerebral arteries. These connected arteries are called posterior communicating artery. The last one is the ophthalmic artery and anterior choroidal artery. The ophthalmic arteries are supplying blood to the eyes, and the anterior choroidal artery supplying blood to the choroidal plexus. This is the fully labeled circle of Willis. For the better understanding, please compare my explanation. Thank you so much. We'll see in the next classes.